Okay. In this lab, I'm going to set up remote desktop gateway services. So I have 3 machines, a NAT router that has 3 interfaces. 1 to a public network, 1 to a private switch, 1 to a DMZ switch. I have my domain controller attached to the private switch. I have my external DNS server attached to a private switch, to the DMZ switch. So I'm going to already have my machines booted up. I'm going to sign into the NAT router and configure the IP settings and the host name. My private subnet for this room, which leads to the internet, is 10.13.4/22. So I'm going to use 10.13.5.1 with a 22-bit subnet mask. That's good for this room. Nope.
These days it's been working with within the
Okay, I'm going to use 192.168.100.0 subnet for my 2 internal networks. I'm going to divide it into 2 networks. So I'm going to have a 25-bit subnet mask. So my DNS server, which will be on my DC, will have a 100.2 IP address eventually. So right now that will be my DNS server. I don't have a secondary DNS server. So this is going to be public, private, then DMZ. The order is being dictated by VirtualBox. Public, private, DMZ. This is on my NAT.
So you have
3 interfaces.
what did you call your private?
Private. So what's my subnet mask? 25 bits. I don't put a gateway. This is my private interface. And my DNS server will be 100.2. And my DMZ 129 will be the first available IP in the second subnet. Same DNS server. And the host name, I'm going to stick to the CS01-VM1, 2, and 3 for my naming convention. So this will be VM1. Now I'm going to my DC. I'm going to statically configure the IP address and the host name.
Would it be easy to put that in here once we done that? We're integrating this into this one,
No, I'm doing this to demonstrate that. You're doing that. I'm only going to do a subset of what I want you to do. Hey guys, the machine isn't running bad with 1 gig. The virtual machines. This is my DC, and it will also be my DNS. I'm going to forward to my external DNS server, which will be what? 130. Because the first IP will be 129 for that subnet. The second IP will be 130. Using my naming convention CS01-VM2. I'm going back to my NAT router. Guys, I'm just going to go on my interfaces, verify I didn't make a mistake with my subnet mask. I need to make sure that I put 25 bits on both private and DMZ interfaces. No, I didn't make a mistake. Okay. Now I'm going to go to my third machine and statically configure the IP address and the host name for my external DNS server. One 192.168.100.130. 25-bit subnet mask. My gateway is 129. And my DNS server is 100.2 eventually. That will be my internal DNS server, which is on my DC. Internal private, yes. I won't be able to resolve names until it's set up, but I know I don't want to have to go back to it later. Using the same naming convention, CS01-VM3. Not if I don't ping by name. I'm just going to double check my interface to make sure I don't have a typo. Guys, this is a very complicated setup. There's so many places to mess this up. No, it's going to be recorded, so I'm going to put it on YouTube before I leave class today. Guys, I forgot to put my gateway in on my DC. I'm going to go back and add that.
Is that your...
My DC, I forgot to put the gateway in.
How come you're using your gateway at the bottom?
No, this will be .1, .2, sorry, .1, .2, .129, .130.
Yeah, because you use 130 for the DC, that's what I was wondering. No,
I used DC for the DNS. So basically, when I promote this to a DC, what's going to happen is it's going to pull that address, make that a forwarder, and then put in the loopback. So as a DNS client, I'm going to go from internal DNS to external DNS to the school. Right, so later when I promote it, it'll set it up right. And because I'm lazy, I don't want to manually set up my forwarders. It's being efficient. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my NAT router and add that role. It doesn't matter which private interface I choose, I'm going to add the other one once I get inside. The other thing I need, what port do I need to open up on this NAT router? I need to open up DNS, and where should I send that to? To 130. So DNS UDP, I opened up to 130. That's going to be my external DNS server. Guys, I'm going to come back to this machine to do the remote desktop once my DC and my external DNS server are up and running. Nope. I'm going to now add Active Directory domain services. And I'm going to stick to an internal and external namespace matching. So I'm going to have the same inside namespace as an outside namespace. The outside namespace will resolve to external IPs. The inside namespace will resolve to internal IPs. Your public DNS would be, one second, what do you mean by public DNS? Oh, point to the inside. Right, the inside your DC, whoever, I'm going to go into why you want to do that. I'm going to make it real apparent why it's important to point everything, if it's touching your inside network, it should go to your inside DNS server. Because your NAT router, as much as it's a server, it's also a DNS client. And it's going to be an internal DNS client. And that router needs to be able to resolve internal names. In real life, you're going to use some routing appliance, like a Cisco router or something. then it doesn't really matter. But for this, it does. So while that's promoting, I'm going to install DNS on my external DNS server.
Okay. Sort of, but you don't have to add any role? Yes. Which one?
I just want to verify the IP of this room. Okay, good.
Certificates. It's the first one. Sorry. To the certificates, it's going to be the first option, right? Active Directory Certificate Server.
Yes.
And on the second screen, saying Certification Authority, Web Enrollment, Online Responder.
First three.
Only the first one? Oh, the first three. Okay. Okay, perfect. Should be root, right?
Right. Not standalone enterprise. You're not joined to the domain.
Okay, I have to join the domain first.
Yeah, join it to the domain, sign in as the main admin.
Okay.
So how do you
No,
find
just
that?
cancel. No, just cancel. Just cancel.
Okay,
Okay,
that
just keep
role
going.
you have to install as well.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep up because I lost the last one.
Yeah, the thing is, I'm going to be doing something slightly different, so I want to keep the video short enough so I can put it in one video on YouTube.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to create a new zone for my external DNS server. I'm going to create a new reverse for my external DNS. And this is going to be for my public. We're going to pretend that 10 network is public, even though it's really not. But for all intents and purposes, 10 is public for us. That's the school's network. So I created a forward lookup zone and a reverse lookup zone. Now I need to fix the SOA records and the record and the NS record. So this is going to be ferris.com, ferris.com. The NS record, I'm going to edit it, ferris.com, and publicly my IP is 10.13.5.1. I am forwarding that port from that IP into port 53 into this machine. So my NS record is right. Now I'm going to create host records for anything that has an external presence. Before I do that, I'll fix the SOA record and the NS record for the reverse. ferris.com, 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 and my public IP, 10.13.5.1. Now I'm going to create my host records. CS01VM1.ferris.com. That's my NAT router. 10.13.5.1. And I'm going to create one for CS01.VM3. That's my DNS server. It has a public presence. 10.13.5.1. Again, That's the only. Did I already add that? Yeah, oh sorry, it got created automatically when I fixed the SOA.
Using cloud, right?
I'm sorry?
Using 213.5.
Right. And because I checked that box, it automatically created the reverse for me. So these are the only boxes that have a public presence. So these are the only ones I need to resolve names for.
Is anybody using 213.5?
10, 13, 5 dot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Do 5.10. Okay, now I'm back on my DC. Just to be complete, because my DNS server and NAT router are touching my private network, I'm going to manually create host records for them as well. And of course, I need to create my reverse. I want to make one zone, and I'm going back to my classful address, so it would include both subnets. On Active Directory machines, I don't need to fix the start of authority or the name server tab because it's done automatically. Standalones, I have to fix it. So for ferris.com, my internal namespace, I'm going to add a record for CS01-VM1. That IP address is 192.168.100.1. And I'm going to create one for my DNS server. CS01-VM3 100.130. And it added the reverse records automatically. I'm missing the reverse record for this machine because this machine booted up after I added my reverse. This reverse zone was created after I booted up my machine. What I can do is just go to my forward record, unselect this, hit apply, reselect it. Hit OK. And there it created it for me. So internally, I have host records for all my internal machines. Externally, host records and pointer records. Externally, I have host records for every machine that has an internet presence. That's going to be viewed on the internet, I created a host record for. Okay, guys, this is something for the terminal service gateway or remote desktop gateway. During the configuration process, I'm going to create a policy. I need to define in that policy which users are allowed to use the gateway and what computers are allowed access to. So I'm going to create two groups. First group is not that. First group is going to be called Remote Desktop Gateway Users. These are allowed to. These are the people that are allowed to use the Remote Desktop Gateway services. Inside that group, because I don't have any other user accounts yet, I'm just going to add the administrator account. Now I'm going to create another group called Remote Desktop Gateway computers. These are the computers that they're allowed to remote desktop to. So when you connect to this remote desktop gateway, it's going to be like a kind of like a router, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to have everyone connect here, and then it's going to allow them to connect to any machine inside that I want them to connect to. So any machine I have remote desktop turned on, they'll be able to connect to it. So it's going to be like a portal to all the remote desktop machines in my network. I only have one inside machine joined to the domain, so I'm going to allow them to connect to that. That will be my only machine. This isn't really advisable, but I'm going to add. I have to check a computer because I need to add computer accounts. CS 01 VM1, excuse me, VM2. That's the machine they're going to be allowed to connect to. In real life, I wouldn't allow people to remote desktop into a DC, but I only have one machine. We're going to use these two groups later. Do you remember when I told you never join your NAT router to your domain? I'm going to do it right now only because my remote desktop gateway is going to be on the same machine as the NAT. When you set up your lab, your remote desktop gateway is not going to be on your NAT, so you don't need to do this.
Does that mean our DMZ desktop gateway is joining the domain?
Yes, that's going to join the domain, and you're going to have to determine what port number to open up. And it should be transparent, but we'll see. So I'm going to join this to the domain. Again, if you want to test it, my DNS servers are pointing to my internal DNS. So I should be able to resolve my name. If I can't resolve, then I won't be able to join. I'm joining right. If this comes back with an external IP, your DNS is wrong. Fix it, then flush your internal DNS cache. Yeah, if NSLookup comes back with an external IP, your DNS is wrong. Fix that, flush your DNS cache, and then try it again. Our client is going to be on the internet. Someone from the internet is going to want a remote desktop to a variety of machines inside of our private network.
So maybe we can use our host machine.
Right. We have to play a little trick with it to get to accept the certificate. Now, what port does terminal service or remote desktop use? 3389 protocol is TCP. If I had 4 machines I wanted to remote desktop to, I can't open up that same port to 4 different machines. If I wanted to, I could manually do an address pool and then map an IP address to every individual machine, but it's easier just to set up a gateway, everyone connects to the gateway, and from there do remote desktop into the machine that you're remoting into. 3389 TCP. That's a remote desktop port, RDP port. So guys, I'm going to sign in as a domain admin. Again, when you set up your lab, you don't need to join your NAT router to the domain. The only reason I'm doing this is because this is going to be the same machine that's my RDGW, Remote Desktop Gateway. are you using a 22-bit subnet mask and your gateway is 10.13.4.1?
No, it's what I'm with my so
Your gateway should be identical to that of the real machine. So guys, I'm going in and installing the remote desktop role. On my NAT. I'm installing remote desktop services. Okay. When I click the remote desktop allow under system properties, that turns on something called terminal services in administration mode. That only allows domain admins or local admins to connect. But if you wanted all your users to be able to connect to a box, you need to install this remote desktop session hosting and this remote desktop licensing. That will allow non-administrative users to remotely connect and allow multiple non-administrative users, depending on how many licenses you buy. If you buy 20 licenses, then 20 users will be able to connect. And you would have to contact Microsoft to see, to purchase those licenses. And then once you purchase the license, you would take the number of licenses you purchased and put it in here. Guys, because I don't have a license to do this, I'm just going to continue with administrative remote desktop, the default, which is allow one person to connect at a time, and they have to be part of the administrative group. But if you want normal users to connect, you have to install this and add your license. And you need to do that on the machines where you want users to terminal services into, to remote desktop into. People aren't going to be remote desktoping into this machine here. This is only going to be the gateway. Believe it or not, I don't need to turn remote desktop on for this machine. I'm going to turn remote desktop on for the machines I want to connect to, not this one. This is just going to be the gateway. So when you select that, it's going to prompt you to install the web service. Does that give you a hint as to what ports you need to open up in your router to get to this service with a certificate? 443. 443 because it's going to be HTTPS. I don't have a certificate server set up. You won't have this issue. You will have one. But for me, I'm just going to create a self-signed certificate. For you, I want you to create a certificate generated by your CA. So you're going to have to figure that out, how to create the certificate, how to auto-enroll and get the certificate. Click Next. And you're going to have to set up a policy to accept that certificate, a GPO. Okay, so I'm going to configure my connection policy or my authorization policy for my remote desktop gateway. And I'm going to do that now. I could manually create it after the fact, but I just used the wizard. Okay. By default, administrators are allowed to use the remote desktop gateway. I also want these users to be able to use remote desktop gateway. RDGW users. These are the users that can connect through a remote desktop. So any users you want to add, put them in this group. Okay. I'm going to create this RDCAP. These are the users that are allowed to connect. This is to be part of my policy. Only members of the user group that you selected will be allowed to contact to connect. Who did I select? Okay. Guys, it's a little confusing. These users in this previous screen, this policy works with them. Now, if I go ahead to this RD, RAP are the computers they're allowed to connect to. It's on the same screen. Where there's CAP, you had to enter it on the screen before. So these are the users that are allowed to use the service. These are the machines they're allowed to connect to. RDGW computers. Click next. Click next. NPS. And I'm going to install. So it's using remote procedure calls over HTTP. And this is kind of like a proxy server. Because people are going to connect to me and I'm going to redirect them to the machine running remote desktop. Guys, while that's installing, I'm going to turn on remote desktop on my DC. Because that's really the only machine that's going to be inside. Configure remote desktop. I'm going to allow computers with network level authentication. So any machine that you added to that RDGW group, you need to turn remote desktop on. I'm just turning on administrative remote desktop, administrative mode remote desktop. If you want normal users to do it, to be able to connect, you need to install the remote desktop session host. Yeah.
If, let's say you had a normal user station, if you log in as an admin, you can still do the if you have
Right. You know, regardless of whatever station it is, if you're admin, you can connect using remote desktop in administrative mode. The other mode, guys, incidentally, if you're not in administrative mode, you're in application mode. That's the name of it.
But those computers have to be added to the group.
Right. So they still need to be added to the group because that's for the gateway service. That has nothing to do with remote desktop. It just says what machines are you allowed to connect these users to. Okay. So close. So guys, that's set up now. Here's my policy. If I had licensing, I would see that here, but I don't have any licensing. So right now I'm running in remote desktop administrative mode. I don't even have remote desktop installed on this machine. I never turn remote desktop on here at all. You can see it's not done. Okay, so guys, I created a self-signed certificate. I did not create a certificate generated by a CA. So by default, I don't trust it. So I'm going to go to my web server, which is what machine? HTTPS cs01.vm1.ferris.local. Which DNS server? I'm on my NAT machine right now. Which DNS server will resolve that name to an IP? My internal DNS. Because remember, when I go to my network properties, all my interfaces have my internal DNS server. So what will my internal DNS server resolve that to? My inside IP for this machine. NS lookup cs01 vm1.ferris.com. So it resolves it to an internal IP.
Why did you not point them to the
Because this machine, for all intents and purposes, is inside my network. I don't want to have this machine being, as a client, resolving IPs, machines to outside IPs. Because I want this machine, if I need to connect to an internal computer, I just want to go to the internal IP. So I need to resolve to internal IPs. So guys, I'm typing HTTPS. Guys, I'm doing a trick here. This is kind of just to get by that self-signed certificate. I want to check that so I don't keep getting this warning. It says, wait a second, there's a problem with that certificate. Yes, I don't trust it. But I know I set it up, so I'm going to trust it. So I'm going to continue to the website, even though it's not recommended. You see this guy right here? This is my information about my certificate on my browser. If I click that little box, I can view the certificate. The CA root certificate is not trusted. To enable trust, install the certificate in the Trusted Root Certification Authority store. So I'm going to install this there manually. I'm going to place it in the Trusted Root Certification Authorities store. You know that certificate MMC snap-in we used last night, or last time we met? We can do the same thing with that certificate. Instead of installing it right from the certificate, I could have downloaded the certificate, saved it to my desktop, and opened it up with that utility. Click Next. Finish. It says we're going to accept it, install it. Yes. It was there. So I'm going to close out and go back in and verify that I am in fact not going to get any red errors. Because now I've trusted that certificate. Look, it's blue, it's encrypted. So now I trust that certificate. Okay, guys, now I need to do the same thing to my machines on the internet. I need to trust this certificate because this is not some trusted root store. I need to manually trust it. So I'm going to go to my real machine, and I need to trick the machine because my DNS is not registered in the internet. I'm going to point my DNS to my public interface on my network. 10.13.5.1. So I'm going to test that out. I'm on my real machine now. And let's look up, who do I connect to? 10.13.5.1. Who is that being forwarded to? My external DNS server. So for all intents and purposes, this is a client on the internet. Okay, so if I want to connect, if I connect to that IP, if I connect to that name, it'll be that IP. That certificate has a name built into it, that name. So if I resolve that name to an external IP, that certificate will work. If I resolve that name to an internal IP inside my private network, that certificate will still work. Because the certificate doesn't have the IP built into it, it just has the name. So that's why I need to have a consistent naming scheme inside and outside. Because that certificate is built with the name inside of it. So if I'm outside, I'll resolve it to an external IP. If I'm inside, I'll resolve it to an internal IP. So I'm going to download that certificate just like I did on my inside host. I'm going to do it to my outside host. So I'm going to type in HTTPS. Oh guys, there's a trick. Because this machine is joined to the domain, the school's domain, I don't have administrative authority to install something into my trusted root store. So I need to run this browser as administrator. I need UAC to kick in. So I'm going to shift, right click, and run it as administrator. So when I trust that certificate, it'll actually install for me. If I don't do this, I won't even be